Hello, everyone. We're here to talk about Eurovision 2024. All of it. All of the mess, all of the things that went wrong, some things that went right. It's not all doom and gloom, but it certainly feels that way in the post Eurovision season that we've just entered. I've covered Eurovision now on this channel for about 5 years in a more full-fledged way, and I really lament the fact that this year there are just so many extra factors coming into the conversation that were there before but have been just dialed up to 100, making the contest feel like that whole idea of apolitical neutrality, just completely throwing out the window, having to kind of become such a divisive and toxic environment. I'm afraid I can't not talk about the controversy. I mean, I feel like it would be disingenuous to recap Eurovision this year and act like everything was normal, like there wasn't anything fishy behind the scenes. I feel like that would be so obtuse and disingenuous to the spirit of the contest and what it represents and how the EBU has failed on so many fronts this year to honor their own pledges of united by music. This has been a travesty to some extent, as hardcore Eurovision fans all over have been feeling heartbroken at so many choices that were made this year that have shown that the contest is not going in a good direction. It makes me concerned about the future of Eurovision, and I don't want to be too hyperbolic. I was debating putting, on the thumbnail, like the death of Eurovision, like a lot of clickbaity YouTubers would probably put in their titles. And I opted not to ultimately because I want to be optimistic in this video. And but I also want to be realistic. I feel like there is a lot of jumping to hyperbole and jumping to extremes and exaggerations to try and, sell a narrative when in my honest opinion, I don't think that Eurovision is done or finished. I think the Eurovision we once knew may be done and finished and maybe transformed into something else. But if you weren't to be paying attention so much behind the scenes, I'm not entirely sure you would necessarily say that Eurovision is going to change that much. It depends what your perspective is going in, what your expectations are going forward. But I'm going to talk about the controversy, but I also just want to, of course, recap the contest from a musical standpoint, from a performance standpoint, and just from a fan of the contest, the whole shebang, because even though there's so much controversy, there were still so many aspects of this show that, let's just say, were a nice distraction for me and why I love Eurovision, why I always cover it, and why it's one of the few major competitive events that I actually really tune in for. And of course cover like this on this channel. And, going back a week ago to when this is being filmed to semifinal one, which feels like 84 years ago at this point, due to the fact that last Tuesday's semifinal was infinitely less controversial than the semifinal on Thursday, and then of course the grand final. It really does kind of make you miss how optimistic we might have been about the contest as we were going into the first semifinal, even though most of us were very worried already that we were in for a disappointing mess of a contest, regardless of how semifinal one went. And of course, the elephant in the room is that in semifinal one, Israel was not competing, so we didn't have that cloud looming over our heads. So let's go and rewind back. I'm going to cover my thoughts on semifinals 1 and 2, and then talk about the grand final. I'm more going to be specifically talking about in the semis the songs that did not qualify, because the songs that did, I'll talk a little bit more about in the grand final section of this video. We kicked off semifinal 1 by the Cypriot entry from 2018, Eleni Foureira, her red-hot hit Fuego, which then transitioned into Eric Sade's song Popular. I probably butchered that pronunciation. And then we went into Chanel and her performance So we had three performers who I believe were second or third place. I'm not quite sure where Eric placed in 2011. I can't recall off the top of my head. But it was a nice way to give the runner-up a chance to showcase that they're just as beloved, and, Karria from last year also performed in semifinal two. We love seeing alumni come back for the contest. But what's noteworthy to point out is that Eric had a kafia written on his wrist, which is a traditional Palestinian garment with patterns that are very identifiable now because of the general socio-political conversation right now going on around the Israel-Hamas war. And the keffiyeh has become a real symbol for Palestinian resistance to the onslaught and attacks, and solidarity for the Palestinian people, the people of Gaza. And it was very impressive to see Eric. He is a staunch supporter of Palestine. He has been very vocal about, the Israeli government and their crimes against humanity. And he is Palestinian. So he's one of the most forefront Eurovision artists, as far as I'm aware, who has that tie to the culture, which makes it even more problematic that the EBU would have a spokesperson express disappointment. An organizer of the show in Malmo express afterwards disappointment at seeing Eric wear the garment. And when you think about what this is, which is just a piece of fabric that is very much tied to his own cultural identity, it is very hypocritical for Eurovision to try and censor someone from bringing their own ethnicity and heritage on stage, when that is something that is very much celebrated when other countries like Ukraine or Armenia, just this year for examples, but others have always done, and it's always been celebrated. But apparently this year, anything Palestinian is taboo. And so there has been many artists have been flaunting that rule, have been protesting that rule and doing their own thing regardless, which I really support in this act of censorship that I think is quite appalling. If there's anyone who deserves to wear that garment on stage, it is Eric. And I can't believe that Eurovision would stoop that low and paint him as a agent of chaos, of political malcontent, for doing something that not only morally, I think, has so much solid ground and footing as a statement, which Eurovision has stood up for before, pro-LGBT, for example, movements. Eurovision is very much political when it comes to supporting gay rights, but not when it comes to supporting Palestinians in the face of slaughter and widespread massacre from Israeli forces. Crickets. That's too political, too controversial. We can't go there. So that was the first of many disappointing choices that the EBU made tonight. But that's the only real noteworthy one from semifinal one. The rest of the semi went smoothly, without any disqualifications, without any serious hang-ups or issues in that regard, at least from what we could see on stage. The five acts that did not qualify were Australia, Poland, Moldova, Azerbaijan, and Iceland. I talk about in my semifinal one predictions video how I felt that Moldova and probably Iceland were pretty much surefire non-NQs, non-qualifiers. So them not qualifying was absolutely not a surprise. As far as Moldova is concerned, I really do feel Natalia Barbu. I felt Natalia Barbu's package. It was trying, but not hard enough, and I feel there wasn't enough cohesion with the visuals that we were getting. It didn't tell any sort of story that was easily identifiable. And although her vocals are competent, I think the song just doesn't lend itself to leaping off the page or being memorable melodically. Although I really do give props to artists, especially on their own, when they perform other instruments on stage. And so her doing the violin, performing the violin, really did give her a leg up. But at the end of the day, she came third from the bottom in the televote, which of course, remember there are no juries in the semis. So from the televote, she only received 20 points. Whereas Iceland was at the very bottom, only receiving 3 votes. Hera Björk, this isn't her first time at Eurovision. She was just there. She was just happy to be there. She's the fun Eurovision aunt who isn't going to take anything personally when it comes to Eurovision. I think that she, was just happy to be on stage, to be able to, spotlight a woman slightly older having fun and dancing. I did kind of, I liked the tassels. It was very much an ABBA tribute costume with the 70s look, but perhaps I preferred the styling for the Iceland final in the red. It was just a little bit more elegant. Uh, but, overall, I mean, it's an inoffensive song that is very middle of the road and not exactly screaming qualification, um, with at best her like average vocal ability. Um, but it's just unfortunately it wasn't gonna pass. It wasn't going to get the ticket, and we all were surprised there. Azerbaijan was also one I think we all felt pretty confident wasn't going to qualify. And I will say the staging was a bit puzzling. I wanted to know more of the story, and of course, this one was in a different language, so there is that barrier there to English speakers. But I didn't hate the staging. I didn't hate it. I didn't feel like it was uh, like I liked that it had an overall palette that it stuck to. Whereas maybe in Moldova there was like a little too much in the screensaver-esque background, fantasy trees and wind and leaves, water. It was a lot of nature elements, but maybe it felt like a little too all over the place. And this felt like very much like one kind of color tone, one color palette, with the statuesque kind of figure in the background with the hands and the head. Um, and it was a pretty solid vocal performance. Probably one of the best of the NQs, but we knew it probably was still not going to make it. And of course, Azerbaijan is not immune to criticism geopolitically. Azerbaijan is another country that, if I were running the contest, I would also sanction by, disqualification of some form, at least for the time being, because of the ongoing conflict with Armenia. And of course, that is a very complicated situation in Artsakh or Nagorno Karabakh, in that disputed region between the two countries. But I've heard a lot of the Armenian side, and it doesn't look good for Azerbaijan. Doesn't look good for them. It doesn't look good for them. And a lot of Azeri propaganda is very much, very, very, very anti-Armenian, and basically trying to completely, not only get rid, completely annex that region from Armenia, but all of Armenia itself, they believe belongs to Azerbaijan. And Armenia is just trying to survive. I don't see or feel any sort of Armenians wanting to invade Azerbaijan. It's not like that. I very much view Armenia as the Ukraine in this situation, and Azerbaijan the Russia. So I'll just leave it at that. Poland was always on the fence, but the staging was just way too much. There was no rhyme or reason to what we were seeing on stage, and not everything was executed that well. I think that Luna is a real. Luna has such an energy and essence to her that I can't help but want to root for. But and I liked the song, as an MP3. I liked the song going into the contest, but I felt it really fell apart on stage, where it honestly kind of just I diluted it so much and muddied it so much and made it so aimless in direction that it just made sense that it didn't come together. When she is supposedly riding that unicorn or that horse, it's very apparent she's not, and so it just looks like a really bad CGI job. There's just a whole lot of, why'd you have to do this? We didn't need to do this. This is completely undercutting the essence of your song and underselling yourself you're throwing everything in the kitchen sink. It's not necessary. Boy, doesn't Luna interestingly, who shares the name, look a lot like Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter. I was struck by that every time I saw her in interviews. I was like, even her presence and demeanor, she just gives a such strong Luna Lovegood energy. I love her. I love her. She was probably one of the artists I felt for the most in semifinal one with not going through. But the hardest to swallow was certainly Australia. This is the first year that Australia has participated where they actually traveled to the host city to perform and didn't qualify. Australia has qualified every year since 2015 except for 2021, but they did not fly to Rotterdam for that performance. They did it over virtual, understandably because we were still in COVID. But this was the first year that they packed their bags and went there, and it didn't pay out. And boy, I'm really upset for them because if I got to say one thing, it's that Voyager did not need to be in that final last year, and this song did. Electric Fields would have qualified in my book over Voyager. However, they didn't compete in the same year, and this was a competitive year. This was a competitive year. So, I mean, it sucks, but they were almost there. They came 41 points from the televote. They were 11th place, which I'm glad to see. I would have hated to see them any lower than that. But I really did. I felt like Electric Fields did need a little bit more going on the stage. The budget was clearly not there. It was, interesting to see the Aboriginal musician come out on stage, but that was so close to the end of the song that even though it did save it a little bit in your mind as for memorability, the rest just really didn't feel that different from two singers just standing on the stage, one with their keyboard and one with a microphone. Though I really did love the styling on the female singer. So I'm sad to see them go. The song, who would have I qualified over them? Who would I've swapped their place with? Finland, 100%. Now, I know Finland didn't actually steal their spot. It was Serbia, because Serbia was the one that just made it. And honestly, that doesn't surprise me. When I say that when Serbia was the first one announced for the qualifications, I was absolutely shook. And then they announced Slovenia. So they announced the two bottom placed qualifiers first. I was like, wow, we're getting Slovenia, we're getting Serbia. They don't want the girl bops. But, then we did end up getting Cyprus. We did end up getting Luxembourg. I wasn't sure about those, but I felt pretty confident we would. We got Portugal. I was very happy to see. Portugal has fully landed for me. I feel really bad ranking Portugal so low on my initial ranking video I put out back in March. But seeing it performed live, I think, and I think her performance greatly improved vocally from the Festival de Canção performance. She really nailed it. Finland is the one I wouldn't have put in there because I'll talk about it in the final, but Finland is it's just embarrassing. And we all saw a little bit too much of Windows 95 Man. Let's just put it that way. But everyone else deserved to qualify, and, I had no problem with these qualifications. I just felt bad for Australia. Moving on to semifinal 2, however, things became a little bit more contentious. We had 16 songs competing. Interesting, because I only count 15. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to ignore Israel in this video. There's just too much to talk about regarding it. The non-qualifiers were at the bottom: Malta with 13 televote points, Albania with 14, San Marino with 16, Belgium with 18, Denmark with 36, and Czechia with 38, meaning Czechia was 11th, barely made it. Norway was with 43 and was able to take the edge. Now, when we're talking about announcing qualifiers, there was also some real shock for me with this one in terms of their first announcement. Because one of the countries, this almost made sense to me, but one of the countries I 100% felt was not qualifying was Latvia. And not only did Latvia not come in 10th place, it didn't come in 9th either. It came in 7th. Latvia got 72 votes from the public. And I am a little amazed. I mean, if the jury was involved, I would 100% understand, because Latvia vocally just knocked it out of the park. Staging could have been improved. Latvia definitely did the less is more approach. Although I grew to like what he was wearing, the breastplate. I mean, it didn't hurt that his muscles. Let's just put it this way. I know I'm supposed to talk about the non qualifiers, but I just have to get this out there. Let's just say that it helped that Dawn's had some nice arms. Those rippling arms really helped sell the costume for me. And if his arms hadn't been like that, I'm not sure I would have felt so strongly about the styling. Although I always love blue, a rich royal blue I will always be here for. It's so vibrant on stage. Um, can I just say I think Dawn's has become my new Eurovision husband. I'm going to talk about Belgium. Belgium was there and when I talked about semifinal 2 in the predictions video, but I think Dawn's, well, he obviously took Belgium's spot in the semi in the final. So he's probably done it now, obviously, for my Eurovision husband award. I love Belgium, and Belgium was the one I was the most sad to see go out of the group, out of the 6 that didn't qualify. But at the end of the day, Musty's vocal was just never really going to be solid enough. It was never going to be reliable enough. I was watching some of his performances, both the acoustic and the performances he did in like more of a similar Eurovision environment, and they were just always in certain places really rough or in all of the places really rough. He was always sharp or flat. It was just really hard for him to sustain the vocal, and it's a hard song to sing. And I do feel for him, but it wasn't coming together. And the staging could have been improved, though I really did love the circle of microphones and what it represented and how he was sort of in amongst them looking at the camera. And then I really did like his styling. It was nice seeing the midriff, of course, but I liked the white fabric with the sparkle. I thought it made him look like just such a debonair rock star. Delicate but powerful, which Musty sort of, I think, imbues in his presence and performance. But it just wasn't it. And I'm not terribly surprised that Belgium has had trouble qualifying with entries that I think deserve it, but just get edged out by ones who are doing it just a little bit better. Um, the other one, however, I was kind of shocked to see not qualify after watching all of the 16 songs perform was San Marino. Am I the only person who thought Megara's performance, maybe it's not from a vocal perspective, but just from an overall stage show perspective, I found it electrifying. I was absolutely gobsmacked by the amount of costuming, the amount of LED interesting work that was stage design that was going on. I did not expect such a narrative to be displayed on stage, and I was really, really rooting for them. They for a small country, it felt like the budget was pricey. It felt like they had really come with some budget this year. And so I was kind of feeling like maybe they were a lock after that performance. And then it was like, oh, no, no. San Marino, it's hard for them. They do make it in. They don't have a horrible qualification streak. But, it doesn't help them that they're such a small country. I think with the televote, that really hurts them. I don't know how much Italy helped them out, but that's really their best bet. And they came with 16 points. I mean, I'm glad they're not at the bottom. I think that people are really upset about Malta being at the bottom. Look, Malta being at the bottom is probably a bit harsh, but at the end of the day, I think what Georgia was doing, at the end of the day, I'm conflicted because I don't like Sarah Bonici's Loop as much as a song as I do Firefighter or We Will Rave. However, when we're comparing the actual performers and the overall package, I think that We Will Rave is weaker than Loop. Sarah Bonici did everything that she could do with that mid-ass girl bop song. I mean, it is the kind of song that you see at Eurovision every year that has appeal for so many in the fandom. But if you're going to do a Chanel Fuego moment, like an El Diablo Fuego slow-mo thing, if you're going to do something in the spirit of those songs, it's got to have a memorable hook that doesn't feel like an afterthought. And for Loop, I didn't really feel the hook the hook didn't feel as infectious. or as organic for me. It didn't as much as Georgia or Austria. But I would have kicked Austria out because We Will Rave was not vocally a performance that I think is deserving of the grand final. And there were some questionable dance moves. Um, she looks great. I love the costuming, the nightclub, rave energy with the stage. I loved the sort of I liked having the pyramid above her. It just was an interesting way of using the space that was something different from what the other acts were doing. But it was a great closer for the final. I will give it that. But yeah, 46 points. It kills me that Norway got less points than that. But we should have been concerned about Norway given these televote results because we'll get to the final and it's really disappointing how Norway fared there. Czechia almost made it, and I must say we were all underselling, we were all underrating Aika with Pedestal, but she really did do the best she could do with that song on stage. The pyro, the use of all of the cubes above her, the vocals were spot on. The robustness of the performance, it just felt so energized and so confident. It's a mid Paramore throwaway song, but she sang the hell out of it, and I would have given her a spot. I mean, again, if we're talking about songs that shouldn't be there, besides Israel, Austria, I could have seen Austria being swapped out with Czechia or Belgium, and I would have been happy, or even San Marino. Denmark is tough. I mean, I always felt like Saba was perhaps the bookies' least likely qualifier out of this group. I just wasn't seeing a lot of. I feel like no one was talking about Saba this year. There was no one was talking about the song like they enjoyed it or hated it. They were just indifferent. They forgot it existed. It is such a by the numbers X Factor ballad, something you'd sing when you're like on that final stage, that I think we just all kind of just said good for you and moved on to the next thing. But I don't know if it was just the NBC broadcast. I watched the performance on Peacock, the shows on Peacock, and I will say that I do feel the audio is always subpar there because the production really drowns out the vocals, and it was so apparent on Sand. It was apparent on a couple other performances too. And I really couldn't hear her at certain pivotal moments where I really wanted to. And I was watching with my parents, so I didn't want to turn up the volume too loud. But I was like, I feel like I really have to turn up the volume to really hear her vocals at certain parts of this song. And I just think that I don't know if it was like that on stage, but yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame, but I was not surprised. And then Albania. There just wasn't room. I respect what Besa was trying to do, like I do all these artists, but I'm okay with it not coming into the top 10. Um, Now, as far as the qualifications are concerned, I was expecting Israel to qualify. I think that was like you're delusional if you're thinking it's not going to. I was hoping it wasn't. But looking at the past and how Israel has done, looking at how Israel won the semifinal last year it was in, it seemed like the writing was on the wall that Israel was going to qualify. And sure enough, it not only qualified, but it came in first place in the semi again with 194 televote points. The rest of the world vote in the semifinal went to Israel, and it did as well last year too. So there is potentially an issue there. And we'll talk about the rest of the world vote when we get to the grand final. But the Netherlands almost made it with 182. I was really happy to see Armenia actually even beat out Switzerland or Greece. I knew Armenia was a populist entry, but I wasn't sure if it was going to get up there. I was kind of seeing Armenia in the bottom 4. Seeing it in the top 3 made me really happy for the semi. But, it doesn't entirely predict how these countries are going to place in the final. It does a little bit, but not entirely, evidenced by how Switzerland, the winner of the entire contest, only came 4th. But that makes a little bit more sense when you look at the televote results for the grand final, where Switzerland actually came in 5th. So it kind of makes sense to some degree. I loved the Johnny Logan performance. He still got it. He was a good looking guy, still a good looking older gentleman. Um, but, it was very apparent, especially at the close of semifinal two, that things were starting to unravel. Things were starting to come out online about different Israeli uh, journalists and members of the delegation following other contestants and secretly recording them and posting them on Twitter and on TikTok. And reports were starting to come out from some delegations, from the Irish delegation in particular, about uncomfortable behavior, being photographed without permission. We knew that Joost Klein was getting pushed a bit over the edge. Fortunately, on Friday, May 10th, things really all started to fall apart. It's like normally for Eurovision, there are 3 days we talk about. There are the two semis. Of course, there are the jury performances the days before those. And then there's the grand final, which has their jury performance and the big dress rehearsal. And then there's the final. Well, it turns out Friday became just as big of a day for the public as Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday was, because on May 10th, lots of crap went down. The most shocking and disappointing was the disqualification of Joost Klein, the representative for the Netherlands, over this, what was an ongoing and is still an ongoing investigation over some form of verbal assault. Things at the beginning were very vague. We were not getting a lot from the EBU, and they said the police were involved and that the matter was being overlooked. But for the moment, Joost is not going to be doing his dress rehearsal. And then it turned into Joost is disqualified. And we started to get a little more information. The victim in question was a member of the Swedish production team, a photographer, allegedly, and that no one physically was hurt or touched. But from what we have gleaned since, Joost made a threatening gesture after apparently he had been, asking not to be photographed or recorded backstage and having that, privacy violated. That he was getting more and more frustrated on edge, and that he made some sort of gesture and a movement that really spooked the production staff. Apparently, according to the statement, a camera was broken. But that is a little bit in conflict with the idea that Joost didn't touch the woman. So maybe the camera was dropped in the shock of the moment, but it's very unclear. There are still so many questions, even as I'm sitting filming this on Tuesday, May 14th, a couple days after the final. We still have so much unanswered about what really went down. And I will talk a little bit about my thoughts on this because, it colors the results of the entire grand final, but also the mood. It really cast a huge shadow. If Israel hadn't already enough, it cast a huge shadow. There was a lot of speculation and kind of conspiracy already brewing around certain artists and their sort of distaste or comfort level with the Israeli delegation participating. There was that press conference where a journalist asked the Israeli delegation, "Are you sure that you being here is, I'm paraphrasing, good for the well-being and safety of everyone involved?" And Eden Golan, the participant's spokesperson, said, "You don't have to answer that question," to Eden, in which Joost Klein said, off camera, "Why not?" And you can see Eden's face kind of, go, "Ooh, he did not just say that, did he?" Could that have sparked a real irreparable rift between Joost and his team and the Israeli delegation? And could it be that some sort of, I don't want to get my tinfoil hat on here, but I've been maybe on Twitter too much. Could it be possible that there was some sort of retribution enacted by the Israeli team to try and spin a story that may or may not be true? Maybe there are elements of truth, but it was blown out of proportion to get him disqualified. Because, the Netherlands was one of the big televote heavy hitters. And having the Netherlands out of the equation on Saturday would have seriously helped Israel potentially win not only the televote, but potentially the entire contest. You see, something else had happened on Thursday that had got all of us scrambling. And again, if you all probably know what I'm referring to, the Italian broadcaster RAI accidentally leaked the Italian televote scores on the bottom of the screen as they were being given during the contest. And it was revealed that Israel swept the competition. It was not even close, by over 25 percentage points, sweeping the other entrants with 36% of the vote. This got all of us really scared, okay? Because it showed just how powerful the voting bloc for Israel was going to be on Saturday. And so throwing into the mix, disqualifying the Netherlands, you've got a perfect storm, meaning Croatia, the only other populist televote entry in the contest who really had a shot of winning, was kind of our last bet, our last hope against an Israeli win this year. And of course, some of you may be wondering, what is so bad about an Israeli win this year? Well, if you've been living under a rock, there are a lot of reasons why a lot of people would not like that to be the case. And so I am going to discuss my full thoughts on Israel and their overall placement in this competition. But I want to paint a picture of how I think a lot of people have already illustrated how the tension behind the scenes was so palpable and affecting everyone on stage that, especially at the grand final and afterwards, tons of artists really, leaked or revealed that they felt very intimidated by the Israeli delegation, and that they also felt that the EBU was being harsher than ever on all of the strict, ridiculous rules that were being set in place for them on where they could go, when they could be recorded, what they could say, what they could wear on stage. Ireland's entrant Bambi Thug was in semifinal one, unable to have ceasefire written in an ancient 4th century Druidic text called Ogham on her temple, or on her face, on the side of her face, and instead it just wrote "Crown the Witch." This is something so obscure that no one would ever pick up or notice. But the EBU was so scared of the political connotations that they forced her to remove it. Well, suffice it to say, Ireland did have that text written on Bambi Thug's face for their grand final performance. And I believe that that was one of the caveats that Ireland demanded in the negotiations that were being held behind the scenes between Friday and Saturday, because it was revealed after the fact that several countries, including the UK, Spain, Norway, Ireland, and Portugal, were all heavily considering withdrawing from the contest and not performing as late as Saturday morning. It was that in disrepute. Everything was up in the air. We were waking up on Saturday like, we don't know where this contest is going. Is the contest even going to happen? Is Martin Osterdahl going to be fired? Is he still going to have a job? It was, when I tell you, it was the, doom scrolling on Twitter was, as many Eurovision fans pointed out on Friday and Saturday, quite exhausting. But it was like a nightmare you couldn't look away from, because you were constantly wondering what new update was coming. There was just update after update of things that, there were some things that went wrong during the dress rehearsal that you can understand. There's always going to be some technical glitches that get, fixed out in the grand final. But there were so many things in the jury show that made people confused. Apparently, Petra and Malin at one point were visibly very distraught on stage and confused when the camera just panned to empty audience seats and things were all over the place in the rehearsal. There were some moments in the rehearsal that had a lot of people, from those who leaked info to the press and to the public, very unsure about what was going on, and that there was definitely some drama going on behind the scenes that was causing everything to slowly start to unravel. So by the time we turned on the show, I was like, gosh, it's going to be really hard to watch the show like we normally do each year, knowing that it's like everything is on fire backstage. Well, it kind of was, but at the end of the day, we still did get a show, and your average person probably wouldn't realize that there was that much drama around it. But it definitely felt off. And there has certainly been since a continued onslaught of controversy that this is going to make Malmo wish they never hosted this contest, and the EBU really have issues to sort out for many, many months. We might have not one, but two broadcasters not only withdrawing from the contest, and Portugal and the Netherlands have been in the contest for decades. Their withdrawal over reasons like this would be devastating for the EBU, but they may even sue the EBU. It is potential. Portugal is upset because Yolanda's performance that she gave on Saturday was not broadcast on TV, and her performance was not uploaded to YouTube. They used her semifinal one performance where she was wearing white nails. On Friday and Saturday, she had nails painted in the the Palestinian colors and the keffiyeh, that scarf and wristband, that Palestinian symbol that I had talked about. Because they were so prominent on her nails, the EBU would not allow that performance to be aired. And they then went with, this is why they have so many different performances, the jury performance, the semis performances. They can replace people and you wouldn't even know. Well, Portugal, RTV is very upset about this. They're also raising the question of fake booing, anti-booing technology, saying that it is undemocratic. And I really, really love seeing them step up to the plate with this, because this doesn't really affect them, but it does affect the integrity of the contest as a whole. But Avrotros, the Dutch broadcaster, has even more of a reason to sue, based on the fact that they still believe the disqualification was perhaps premature and not justified, given all we know and the fact that no one was actually physically hurt or touched, and the police have settled the matter. It is now apparently going to go into the courts, and I will be really interested to see, as this becomes less of a criminal trial and more of a civil trial, whether this turns into something huge and that use really does face any sort of repercussion, or if this is a huge nothing burger. My gut is on the latter, but I will also say that I do not want to immediately act as though we all know better and we all know exactly what happened. I don't know Joost Klein. I don't know if he is potentially someone who could be violent. At the end of the day, it's a little hypocritical for someone like me to automatically jump to his defense and start victim blaming the woman who has filed the complaint, when I speak all about believing women and feminism. So I'm kind of trying to stay neutral on the side of Joost and what he did, but I also do understand Avrotos's frustration, and I do feel that it was a very harsh thing to do, especially given the light of all of the abuse that the Israeli delegation has, documented online, and has been pointed out by fans. Them following around other members of the delegation, asking them for photos, asking them to talk to them. Why won't you talk to me? And getting aggressive. There's a lot of chicanery that was going on that the EBU turned a blind eye to, but with Joost and with other entrants, very strict, very much rules must be obeyed. We have a zero tolerance policy. I don't think that zero tolerance policy for harassment and abuse is being distributed equally amongst everyone in the delegation. I think Israel is getting special treatment, and I think the major reason for that is Moroccan Oil, the company who has been sponsoring Eurovision for many years now. I think it's the overall big reason why. There are other reasons, but I think it's the biggest reason why the EBU did not initially disqualify Israel back in March, when their song was getting flagged for heavy political lyricism in its lyrics. Remember, the song was originally going to be called October Rain instead of now what it is called Hurricane. Boy, and I probably missed a bunch of stuff, so in the comments we can all talk about it. So much drama on Friday and Saturday. It was all starting to fall apart. Petra Mead even looked weary on stage, and people noticed that she was wearing black as if it was a funeral. What is going on? Suffice to say, from the footage that I have seen online, the anti-booing technology was in full force on both Thursday and on Saturday. When the part where the Netherlands was mentioned in the final, the crowd went ballistic and, started singing Europapa to the point where they had to mute the audience and you could tell on the TV. And then, of course, when Israel was performing, they couldn't catch all of the boos. You could hear them in some of the quieter moments, and you could hear the fake applause. I'm sure there was real applause in the stadium, but not like it was for the other acts. And you could also hear the boos when Martin Osterdahl came on screen for his usual pre-voting "You're Good to Go" sequence, which had a very cringe-inducing moment from Linda Woodruff performing a song, which, to be fair, I thought was fun, the kind of Eurovision campy parody song you'd expect, but the subject matter was so ill-timed due to the fact that Martin is responsible for so much of this mess, and most of the Eurovision fandom is really, really mad at him at this point, and hoping that he will resign or be ousted as early as this week. Though I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not too optimistic about all of that. So, with all of that out of the way, let's just briefly touch on the actual running order, the contest itself, before I get into breaking down the votes. And then, of course, my overall thoughts as we move forward with the contest. We opened the show with Sweden. If you've watched my automatic qualifiers video, you know that I'm not a fan of this song. I think that it is the corniest boy band knockoff Swedish pop schlag that you could create. Martinez and Marcus are handsome guys with great styling. I did like their jumpsuits, but did not make a package that is enticing to me. I mean, at least sonically. Visually, they showed how they can stage. They showed how they could LED. But that was not, to me, a package of deserving of 8th place in the final. But I'm just glad they didn't come in the top 5 like Sweden normally does. And then, like I said, we closed the show with Austria. Israel performed at number 6 in the running order, but they were really the 5th performer because what was number 5, which was going to originally be the Netherlands, was skipped. And so there was no voting for entry number 5. It was, we went right from Luxembourg to Israel. The two Israeli artists performed next to each other. I thought that was very interesting. And poor Joost was sandwiched in the middle of them originally, which meant he was probably sat next to them in the green room and in much of the backstage. And that probably was an added, let's just say, gasoline added to the fire. Ukraine was given the 2nd place death spot. But if there is a country that can overcome that curse, it is Ukraine, because they triumphed, coming in 3rd with the televote, coming in 3rd overall in the contest. That was such a powerful performance, and one of the best performances of the night. That it was so wonderful. It was just such a great balm or salve for all the controversy that you were seeing on stage. To see Aliona and Jerry Hale come on stage with just utter prowess and like an invincible aura. The way she climbed that ascending hill. It got chills every time I watched the performance, and the vocals were just absolutely impeccable. And, again, I still think this is a strong year. From performance to performance, we did have a lot of the heavy hitters towards the beginning. We had Lithuania and Ireland relatively early on in the contest. Ireland was perhaps one of the most jaw-dropping spectacles that at least I have ever seen on Eurovision. It felt like a music video. It felt like I was watching high-performance art on screen. The different camera angles. Use of camera angles were really unique this year. I was loving all of the ways that was being expanded upon and pushed the envelope on with many of the representatives. But for Ireland, it was just so symbiotic. You felt like you were not necessarily on a Eurovision stage, but you knew it wasn't fake. You knew it was real and it was there. It wasn't like you were watching something filmed elsewhere, but it was so transportative in the ring of candles and the LED work. The fire, performance, vocals, the dancing. That performance was just absolutely gobsmacking. And I was curious how my parents would take it, as they have a little bit more conservative taste in music. And even they acknowledged that it was such a spectacle and such a show that, regardless of whether that genre of music is really something that speaks to you, you gotta acknowledge the artistry on display. Bambi Thug, I am so immensely proud of for not only just as a non binary artist, what they're representing as for the queer community, but also for Ireland. Ireland has been such an underdog in the 21st century after they won in 1996 and won six times before then in the 20th century. But they've had such a hard time getting on the left hand side of the scoreboard since that not only them getting there, but getting sixth overall with the televote, with the jury, and the overall contest. Is that too perfect? 666. Can you imagine? I mean, that's unreal. I was just absolutely flabbergasted by the performance, and I think everyone was. Well, not Israel. They thought it was satanic. But, it's so easy to lodge these kind of accusations when you're going off of, such superficial things and trying to bite low hanging fruit to cause controversy. But Croatia, which was the other real standout to potentially win, was given a much favorable spot in the running order. So was France. France was very much towards the end as well. France, interestingly, during the performance on Friday, actually, during the moment where he stands away from the mic, decided to speak instead about peace and unity instead of sing that portion of the song. And I thought that was a really important thing to do. And we have many artists on both Friday and Saturday at the end shout things like United for Peace, things along those lines to try and, flirt the line with like saying what really needed to be said, solidarity for Palestinians, peace in that region, but be, big enough to not upset the higher ups, even though they still had their mics turned off a lot of the time afterwards. I want to shout out Greece because I did think that, again, camera work was really interesting for Greece. Even though I do think the overall performance was a little messy, I don't love that we can see her reach into her shoe to pick out her handkerchief. And the transition between like the OnlyFans / TikTok screen, which they were trying to kind of play with the icons on the screen that came up, which I thought was really clever, but also perhaps a little haphazardly done on presentation. Could have been a little bit more seamlessly integrated. I still think it was an interesting way to have the camera follow her around on the stage and not make it so much wide shots of, and close-ups of, it was very much like follow me around in one shot kind of performance where we constantly were changing our point of view, but we were always center of the frame. Uh, but missing Europapa was a real drag on the contest, and it was felt in sort of the aura and energy. It was hard for so many people to get, I think, that invested. And so, thank goodness for Croatia, thank goodness for Ireland, thank goodness for Lithuania, for Ukraine, Switzerland. Switzerland, of course, had also a slightly later in the show performance, which I think really benefited it in the running order, and of course was knocked out of the park. Nemo's The Code was just such a expression of creative spirit and joyful, unbridled, ecstatic artistry and vocal talent. I mean, let's not undersell how difficult that song is to sing. Probably the most difficult song performed on that stage. Not only doing that, but being on a rotating disc that I'm sure could go wrong in many different ways if you are not careful with your footwork and your balance. And Nemo made it look effortless as they, whirled around the stage and enraptured us with their presence and spirit. Such a deserving win. The first win for Switzerland since Celine Dion back in 1988. So I got some statistics. I want to go through the voting and how it all came out and talk about, interesting things that came through. I looked at all of the scoring and, I definitely felt that this is, despite one country's participation, a pretty good top 10. And there are some very satisfying results to look at here. Like I said, this isn't all doom and gloom. There are some things that are really kind of special about what we achieved, especially, let's not forget, Not only Ireland placing so high, they qualified, but also Latvia and Georgia. They all had really long non-qualification streaks that needed to be broken, and they all did it this year. That's really exciting. Shout out to that. But the winner, let's talk about the juries first, because the jury came first. The winner of the jury was obviously Switzerland. 22 countries gave them 12 points. I mean, I just think that that's just absolutely so well deserved. And every time I saw Switzerland, I was just so relieved. And there's a couple reasons why. But the next country to get the most points was France, which I think France was Switzerland's biggest competition in that arena. Four countries gave their 12 points to France: Armenia, Belgium, Iceland, and Slovenia. Portugal came in third. And this is where, again, I really feel if we're talking about vocals, Portugal, France, and Switzerland were cream of the crop. I would say Ukraine as well, and Ukraine is up there. Ukraine got 12 points. They could have gone more, but I was so enraptured by Yolanda's vocal that it completely negated how little perhaps the melody always did for me in the song. Um, I felt that the chorus, the repetitive nature of that chorus line, was not very interesting melodically. But there was so much in the buildup of the verses that I felt this deep, raw emotion, the dynamic and the swell of those melody lines, that it was able to make up for that one part where she is riffing off of that one chorus line that didn't do so much for me. And so her voice was so spotlighted. It was one of the few songs where I felt like the audio of NBC and Peacock was not drowning out her voice. It felt prominent, like I could hear every word. Croatia got 12 points, and unsurprisingly, they were from Cyprus and Serbia, their Balkan neighbors. By the way, Croatia was one of the Portugal ones, as well as France and the United Kingdom. I was really surprised to see the United Kingdom go for Portugal. I thought they would have gone for Switzerland, to be honest with you. Ukraine got 12 points from Czechia and Moldova. And then a couple other countries, four to be exact, all got one set of 12 points. Ireland got their first set of 12 points since God knows when, probably the 90s. From Australia, of all places. That was really shocking, but I was so happy for Bambi for that. Greece got their set of 12 points from Switzerland. Switzerland, the winner of the jury, which I thought was very interesting. Sweden got their 12 points from Germany, which I definitely side-eye because I 100% do not see anything about the Swedish production that is deserving of 12 points. That is very bizarre to me. Germany, I really side-eye with the juries, and we'll get to that. But also, Luxembourg got 12 points, which is a little more deserving. It was a competent package, not the best song, not the best overall. I did think there was a little too much CGI with the tigers coming in to the screen with that 3D aspect for the viewers at home. I thought it was just very overdone, over the top, didn't need to be there. But they were from Israel, and honestly, I was not surprised, seeing how close those two delegations seemed to be this year. By the way, Luxembourg, of course, is returning for the first time in 31 years, which is quite something. But that was another reason why I felt it was almost a guarantee for them to qualify. They had a lot riding on that because it would have looked really bad for them to come back and not make the final. And the plus side of that is that it might get Andorra, other microstates like Andorra and Monaco to maybe wake up and say, you know what, we used to do Eurovision. Let's get back into this again. Luxembourg's doing it. We can too. So same with San Marino. I do think it's very interesting, though, for all the love that Israel gave to Luxembourg, Luxembourg didn't give any of that back. Luxembourg did not give any of their jury points to Israel, not even 1 point. That was interesting to me. So now let's talk about Israel. Israel obviously did not do as well with the juries. It ended up coming in 12th place with 52 points. For a while there, it was looking like they weren't getting any jury points, and I must admit, I was liking it. This is where I have to be somewhat objective. And, you'll come for me in the comments if I'm not, and I'm just going to be. I had talked about in the lead up to this contest in other videos how I had not listened to Israel's song and how I did not plan to. Well, I had talked about how the first time I would be on semifinal two and in the grand final if they qualified. And so I did. I did watch both the semifinal two performance as well as the grand final performance of Hurricane by Eden Golan. And I must say, is it the worst song out of the 37 songs that we have presented on this stage? Musically, is it the worst song? No. Performance-wise, was it performed and choreographed and staged the worst out of all 37 entries? No. There are several entrants that I can point to who I think had worse packages in either or both of those departments. I'm willing to say that. I'm willing to say that. With Israel coming 13th, or was it 12th, with the jury, do I think that that's fair? Yes. Because that's still a pretty good result. There were 13 countries that came below you, and you could have come a lot lower if we're talking about how the jury was working here, which I know a bunch of Israeli fans will probably conspiracize. Conspiracize? Is that a word? Conspiracy theorize about. The jury was sabotaging Israel because they were afraid of the televote, and we can't have Israel win this year. Even if that's true, which it might be, I'm going to be honest with you, it might be. I don't think it's in Israel's best interest to host Eurovision next year. And I especially do not think that it is in the Eurovision EBU, the Eurovision Song Contest's best interest to have Israel win and host in Tel Aviv next year. It was not going to happen. It could not work. It would be too logistically difficult, even from a pro-Israeli perspective. The security reasons alone are, I think, enough to make, if Ukraine was not able to host in 2023, it's the same exact reason that I don't think Tel Aviv can host in 2025. This conflict is going to drag on, and Israel is now very much listed as I think it's a tier 3, tier 4 alert for American citizens traveling to the country. It's not entirely forbidden, but it is not recommended. It is not considered a ultra safe place for many to travel, especially if you're going to something like this, which is going to have a lot of press. I mean, there have been music festivals that have been targeted in Israel that have seen violence. So there's precedent for this to be potentially to go very bad. If we thought that there were security issues in Malmo, Tel Aviv would be a nightmare, logistically. There is no way that Eurovision wants to deal with that right now. Israel got to win not that long ago, and that was a huge PR win for the country. But we can't have we can't be having Israel. It's not going to, from an optics standpoint, it's going to be very difficult for the EBU to balance and walk that tightrope. They're already under such controversial heat already from so many of the fandom, but also certain advertisers and certain delegations and from certain broadcasters. It was in everyone's best interest that Israel did not win. Israel could come second, but it could not win. And so I do think that we do see perhaps a little bit of defensive jury voting this year. But do I think that that entry was necessarily deserving of a top 5 finish in the juries if it was sent by another country? No, not necessarily. I think that it's a competent song, that Eden is a competent singer. There were a few moments where I was like, yeah, girl can sing. Okay, we all know this. Okay, we all know this. But I don't think that I don't think that the song was challenging enough to really get the jury's attention, really challenging enough musically to perform, that I think it would get the jury's attention, like what France was doing, like what Ukraine was doing, like what Switzerland was doing. And so I still think that 12th is a pretty fair space. However, perhaps if that song had been sent by another entry, we might have seen it creep up to as high as maybe 7th or 8th. I think it would have gotten maybe one other set of 12 points, a couple more points thrown its way from other juries. But I still don't think, even regardless of the war, that this was a top 3 in the jury finish kind of performance. But that's just my feeling on it. I don't hate the melody, I'll be honest with you. It's a melodramatic ballad, power ballad, and I am a sucker for those. I am a sucker for them. And I will say I liked that the song, even though it did up its tempo as it moved into the second half, I liked that the song stayed a little bit more in the ballad territory. It didn't turn into a four on the floor kind of situation. But with that being said, I wouldn't be being true to myself if I didn't say that the political connotations of not only that song, but Israel's presence on that stage were too much for me to look past in viewing the song, that I 100% still stand by the fact that I think Israel should not have been allowed to participate this year, and that it tainted the entire experience and caused so much controversy. And that it wasn't even worth it in the end for Israel to bother with it. Eden Golan had to be on lockdown for the whole week. She couldn't leave her hotel room. She had to be subjected to endless amounts of booze, more than almost any Eurovision entrant I think ever has. That's like psychological torture. But of course, Eden signed up for it, so I don't feel terribly bad for her. I think that I will say this. I think that it was definitely, let me just put it this way. I think it was no accident that Israel chose to send a younger woman to represent them because it's all about PR. And there's a lot of ways that you want to be on the right side of PR. And I think by sending a younger woman, you are potentially opening yourself up to having defenses of, how dare you? This is a young girl. Why are you booing her? That's misogynistic. You can hide behind these excuses that you might not be able to so much if it was was a male performer. I am sympathetic to a degree for Eden going through what is probably a really difficult thing on stage when so many on stage, in the crowd are against your being there. But I also know she wasn't forced into this situation and that she fully supports the propaganda that she is willingly being a part of the machine for. And so at the end of the day, she is a 20-year-old woman that is an adult who is capable of making her own decisions. And I do not think she should be treated like she is a child, a helpless child, okay? So that is what I will say on there. But let's talk about where juries did reward Israel. Countries that gave points to Israel. The most points were awarded by Cyprus, Germany, and Norway. 8 points each. Germany sending points to Israel is not surprising, okay? If you know history and you know the relationship that those two countries have. That's all I'm going to say there. Then followed by Belgium and Estonia, who sent 5 points each, Lithuania with 4, France and Georgia, Malta and Moldova with 3, and Latvia with 2. As far as where Israel gave their points, I also thought it was interesting. Luxembourg obviously got the most, but then they rescinded the favor even more so by giving Germany 10 points. Ukraine received 8, Austria 7, Italy 6, Switzerland 5, Croatia 4, Portugal 3, Georgia 2, and France 1. Notice how they did give points to Switzerland. So, they did give points that way. They did throw a bone to the eventual winner of the juries. Not surprising. I mean, for Switzerland to have such a high jury score, it would kind of mean that pretty much every country gave them some jury points. So, as I mentioned before, Switzerland has won twice before. The last time they won was in 1988. They also won in 1956. Switzerland is a very expensive country, so I do wonder where we will be hosted next year. My bet would be Zurich. I've heard Bern thrown out there as well. The lowest ranked country in the jury was Estonia. And I gotta be honest, I had to laugh because I was like, see, this is what happens when you. Why would Estonia get points from the jury? There was hardly any vocal talent on display there. It was purely fun and games. It was purely a romp. And at the end, Estonia has grown on me. I was obviously not a fan from the start. The staging, I actually kind of like that they didn't go balls to the wall with the staging. I felt that it allowed it to just sort of be about the performers and their relationship to each other and some interesting choreography. Spotlighted some of the instruments that some of them were playing. But at the end of the day, Estonia did not deserve any higher from the jury. I'm sorry. And Finland being at the bottom was also, I mean, if there were any two clear bottom jury people, it would have been Finland and Estonia. The only other one I would have seen move right down there with them is Sweden. But guess what? Sweden came in eighth with the juries. Sweden can do no wrong with them. Really, they can't. But Norway coming in 23rd was really hard to see. I think that style of singing, it probably just translated as shouting to the juries. I don't know what to say. I really do worry about Western European countries whenever they have in recent years sent something ethnic, folk, and alternative, something very different in their own language. It's completely flopped in the contest. Let's look at Aya Aya with Blanca Paloma last year. Spain last year, such a criminal moment. The juries did save it a little bit. The jury saved it from completely being in the bottom, but the public really didn't respond to it. And then even more so with Foulain in 2022 with France. France sending something so avant-garde and experimental and folk. And that also came with a similar flop result. It really makes me worry that it's going to tell all of these Western European countries to just send That's How You Write a Song and Unforgettable. It's going to tell them to send Max Martin pop songs. And, sometimes a pop song can be good, but what I really like about Eurovision is that a lot of the songs are about celebrating the ethnic heritage and culture, the folk aspects of their own music scene and culture, overall culture. And Eastern Europe can do that and actually have success. Look at Moldova from a few years ago, look at Croatia this year, look at Moldova last year. That's really nice to see, but for some reason it doesn't translate in Western Europe. Western Europe is expected to send radio-friendly material, otherwise they will tank in both televote and jury. And it's really sad for me to see. And so that's really disheartening, and Norway did not deserve to come this low in the juries or public, but especially with the juries. The juries should know better. And then I was also a little disappointed to see Slovenia not get much love from the juries. There was definitely a vocal on display for Raven's performances. To completely be deaf to that is a little baffling to me. Norway's highest jury score was from Albania. They get 6 points from them. And the only televote scores they received were from Ukraine and Finland, which I thought was interesting. 3 points and 1 point each, respectively. Serbia, which, also didn't really get much love from the juries. It's a little understandable. It was such a soft performance. I did want a little bit more power behind it sometimes. I was just so happy that she made it into the final that I was okay with her placement. But Serbia did receive 12 points from the televote from Croatia. And Slovenia and Cyprus gave them 5 points each from the juries. Whereas Slovenia's highest jury and televote score was from Croatia in 10 points. For the UK. UK was the only, let's talk about the televote. The UK is back at the bottom. Look, I love Ollie Alexander. I think that he is a pop star with such a stage presence. But this song and the performance was not something that I felt the public was probably going to respond to. And perhaps it went a little too far. I mean, I think the camera work didn't help in that the camera work was so disjointed and was trying so hard to be edgy that it kind of turned it into a bit of a mess. It was a little confusing when we were upside down, when we were right side up. There was some interesting work being done, and for the UK, I mean, this staging was pretty impressive. Okay, obviously, Ollie was bringing his own stage design team because he was not, not doing what the UK normally does, and I respect the elevation there, but I don't know. Maybe it's more the song. I just feel like the vocals were not probably as strong as they needed to be, and I just didn't think that this package was going to resonate too much. It was very horny, and it was definitely scandalous. As a gay man, of course, I enjoyed it for that reason, but I unfortunately also worry about conservative viewers and it being so much for them. But they can suck it, really. They who cares about they think? The UK can't vote for themselves. So in some ways, it's kind of like, does it really matter what other people were thinking in the UK about the entry? Uh, they went back to getting no point. And look, I think the UK should not be too hard on themselves. They still are riding the Sam Ryder high, and Liverpool was such a success last year. I want to see the UK really really try and shoot for the stars. I think that they should still try the folk ethnic route, even though it's been kind of not working for Norway, now Norway, France, and Spain. I still want them to give it a shot, maybe send something in like Scots Gaelic, or maybe something in Welsh, or at least have a performer from those places with much more of a cultural tie to it. I need to see something a little bit more Britannic on stage, I think, to represent the UK. I think we got to lean more into that because I think we've tried to do the radio friendly stuff and it's clearly not resonating. And then Norway was almost as bottom. They got 4 points from the televote. I'm not entirely surprised that they didn't resonate to this song as much, but it is a shame. Um, and interestingly, Austria, people were not, I think a lot of people felt like it was a fun party song, but did not deserve to be in the contest. And then Spain, look, with Nebulosa, with Zora, I feel like the national final performance was definitely stronger in terms of the overall aesthetic, in terms of the overall package. I get the appeal, but it really didn't sell. It didn't work for me. I still can't get over the really dated production and the lack of real vocal. I know that Nebulosa is the oldest performer on stage, and I respect that. I love seeing older contestants, but I just didn't really get a sense of, I don't know. It's clearly not something the juries would respond to, and I maybe thought the public would love a little more, but they clearly weren't buying what she was selling. So this Spain being in the bottom doesn't surprise me, and unfortunately also Slovenia. But it's not too unpredictable. But the top, we have Croatia with 337, we have Israel with 323, and we have Ukraine with 307. Um, you know, look, Israel almost beat Croatia. It's only 13-point difference. Yeah, it's only a 13-point difference, y'all. We knew Israel was going to storm the televote. It was just so clear. They won the televote in, gosh, at least 12 countries, if not more, including the rest of the world vote. By the way, this was the first Eurovision that I actually voted in. I actually sent my votes. I only voted 4 times because I didn't want to spend too much money. I voted for Ireland, I voted for Ukraine, and I sent 2 votes to Croatia. And the 2 votes to Croatia were tactical. All right. I do like Croatia, but I sent them 2 votes because I think a lot of us were all feeling that we needed to rally behind Croatia because now that the Netherlands was out, we needed to beat Israel's televote score. And there is so much political voting. And I do think it's worth mentioning that there's evidence of how political this was, because if you look at the top, the global Spotify numbers, I saw a tweet recently that was saying the most streamed Eurovision 2024 songs on Spotify, it does not include, this is May 11th, it does not include Hurricane. So Hurricane is clearly not charting. People are not listening to that song. but they all voted for it, which means they probably didn't even listen to the contest. They probably didn't even watch. There were signs in Times Square. There were ads on YouTube where Eden was speaking tons of different languages. She downloaded that Duolingo app and they put her in front of that screen and they begged for your vote. The campaign was there, and honestly, it was kind of a massive fail because at the end of the day, they couldn't beat the televote and they came only fifth in the overall contest. But again, let's not underscore that the jury was the one who was really doing the heavy lifting there. Otherwise, Israel could have potentially come in at least second place, if not first, if the juries had been going overboard with love for it. But I do think it's very interesting looking at the charts, and seeing where that song is placing. That's all I'm going to say there. Interestingly, Europapa is blowing up. Outside of Europe, it's becoming a huge hit. Not surprising. Israel was the only country that did not award Switzerland any televote points. Thought that was very interesting. Although Switzerland's only 12 from the televote was from the Ukraine. So it's not also like Switzerland necessarily got a lot of 12s. And you have to remember that Switzerland actually came, I believe, fifth in the televote overall. So, it's not like the public were extremely supportive of it, but we were all kind of aware of that. We knew that Croatia was going to beat out Switzerland in the televote, but then the jury would favor Switzerland. This isn't that surprising. And of course, the Ukraine did very well as well, which I was expecting to see, and it was very deservedly so. So all of this led to the overall results, which I have up on the screen here. The top 10: Switzerland, Croatia, Ukraine, France, Israel, Ireland, Italy, Armenia, and Sweden and Portugal. Honestly, if I'm going to be completely honest, and I know that I am someone who is very vocal about supporting Palestine and the Israel-Hamas war and the controversy with Israel's competition here. The real outlier, though, for me in this top 10 is not Israel, it's Sweden. I could maybe lower Israel's placement a couple spots, but in the top 10, I can live with. Sweden being in the top 10, no. Now, if we're rating purely on staging and how handsome boys are, go ahead. But the Eurovision Song Contest, Sweden had no business being that high. No business. Interestingly, it only came in 11th. There are only 49 televote points for Sweden, which isn't that great. Sweden usually doesn't run away with the televote, but it usually does a little better with it. So, it's sort of like a Jan Lundvik number, I think. Or I think Jan Lundvik got more than that. So I was definitely glad to see that it was under 50. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. The TikTok, appeal didn't translate as much, I suppose, as one might have thought it would. So Nemo achieved the third highest combined result under the 2016 and onwards voting system. The higher results, the highest is still Portugal with 758, and of course Ukraine with 631 in 2022. To, of course, what Nemo received, which was 591 points total. There was a pretty glaring point differentiation between the jury and the televote. It was definitely over 250 points. And one of the biggest glaring differentiations that we've ever seen in the contest, but I think that was something we were all kind of expecting as we moved forward here. But looking at these results, a lot of them I'm pretty good with. Like I said, I feel the most for Norway. They did not deserve to be at the bottom. And then I also would have put Sweden. I honestly would have just switched Sweden and Norway spots and maybe lowered Israel a couple spots, and this is perfect. Wouldn't really have. Germany is a little high. Isaac's song didn't do anything for me. It's a competent vocal. Definitely, he must have been sweating under that all those pyrotechnics. I'd never seen so much fire on stage. Jesus. Lithuania coming 14th is a little low. I would have loved to have seen Sylvester. God, I feel so bad for him. Apparently, he was like crying off, when he left the stage. He revealed that, he almost regrets participating. I mean, so many artists have come out and said that they've had a horrible experience. And it's just due to the atmosphere backstage. And I think a lot of it has to do with the Israeli journalists, the people in their team, making it very uncomfortable for people with how they're acting, how aggressive they're being, how much they're trying to prod and pry and get people to have a reaction because they're trying to create content to create outrage. They want people to react to them because they know they're controversial because it'll get clicks and it'll give them a sense of, something to be defensive or to victimize themselves. It was almost like Israel was looking to victimize themselves with how the delegation was behaving. And the EBU, it was a really altogether really disappointing, I don't know, just jarring kind of thing to see coming through the news feed, just story after story of not only the artists, but also now broadcasters. I mean, Avratoss is really fed up with the EBU. One of the guys in a press release said, F the EBU. I mean, I'm like, whoa, this is like, oh, Martin should be really worried. The EBU really needs to. I hope Avratoss and RTV, the Portuguese broadcaster, really go after them because they've got some cases that it's going to be interesting to see in the coming months what comes out of all of this. We had the protests on Thursday and Saturday outside of Malmo for artists against genocide, the pro-Palestinian protests. I loved seeing all of the solidarity. Greta Thunberg was out there. And it was in other cities too. There was one in Copenhagen. There was, in the UK. And I mean, the sentiment is, and in the stadium, I mean, people who were there were feeling like, there was so many people in the crowd who were clearly booing or protesting Israel's presence, but then also feeling threatened by, security. And of course, the Palestinian flag not being allowed. Of course, now the EU is getting involved because the EU is apparently questioning why the EU flag was banned. And I think that is also very bizarre. Apparently, it's too political for Eurovision, and the EU is like, what the heck? So now you've pissed off the EU as well. So, oh boy, everyone is coming at the Eurovision organization, and I think that honestly they deserve it. The end of the day, this and Malmo is like, I don't want to do this ever again. Look at Liverpool; they loved hosting it last year. Such a different level of commitment to it. They were, the turquoise carpet this year was such a letdown. Eden couldn't participate. And there wasn't, I mean, I guess there was weather, but it was very much just like some interviews in a lobby. It was not like the carpets that we've seen in previous years. The level of effort was not matched by even Turin, and everyone calls Turin's contest a fail. Well, now we're all forgiving Turin and, RAI for their perform, because the package they put together was infinitely better than this one. I guess Petra was probably the real highlight of it, Sweden hosting again. This was the first time I ever watched Eurovision live with Petra hosting. She hosted in 2016 and in 2013, co-hosted in 2016. She was great. I love her. I was instantly like, she's so good at just being humorous, but also serious and deadpan. She has a real knack for Eurovision. And then there was Malin, her counterpart, who, interestingly enough, to my American ears, sounded indistinguishable from someone next door. I mean, she sounded so American. I believe she mentioned something about spending a lot of time in the States at one point during the performance, because I was like, that is not a native Swedish speaker. That is not even though she has a Swedish name, she's famous in Sweden as an actress. I was like, Malin does not sound Swedish. So I thought that was very interesting. A lot of people criticized her for coming across as very wooden and deer in headlights. Honestly, I feel like Petra soaked up so much of the charisma that Malin was fine. I didn't really have that much of a problem with her. You could tell she was a little in out of her depth at points, but I feel like Petra was always guiding the ship. So it didn't bother me all that much. I do think that the interval acts, especially for the grand final, were lackluster. We did get the ABBA holograms, which I think we all expected. We weren't going to get really ABBA, which, why couldn't they have shown up for it? I mean, are they really that busy? Like, this is the 50th anniversary. They had Charlotte Pirelli paraded out there quite a bit. She won in 1999. Thought it was quite interesting that they had timed it so perfectly, not only for the 50th anniversary of the Waterloo win, but also for the 25th anniversary of Take Me to Your Heaven, which is a bop, by the way. Although I was confused that it was the same person who represented in 2008, because she was written as Charlotte Nilsson back then. And I was like, this is the same person? Oh, didn't realize she'd gotten married or something. And her name was now Charlotte Pirelli. She represented in 2008 with Hero, but did not win. So they had her performing in the second semifinal, and then they had the ABBA holograms do a little bit. There was definitely some reference to ABBA, but not as much as you might have expected. But, it does make me wish that there are so many Swedish artists that I do wish they could have invited. Like, there's Tuvalu. I always pronounce her name wrong. Why couldn't we have her come on stage? Zara Larsson. I'm surprised Max Martin doesn't make an appearance sometimes. I wonder if he has in the past. Yeah, the interval acts. I will say that Loreen did perform Tattoo, but also a new song called Forever. I wasn't really that in love with the performance. I felt like, again, maybe it was the sound issue that I was having with the NBC broadcast, but her voice was just not kind of rising above the production. And I mean, the space age outfit was interesting, but I feel like the long nails thing is starting to feel a little pointless. I'm not really quite sure why we're doing it anymore. It's her thing, but it's sort of like at a certain point, it starts to feel a little bit, I don't know, a little bit played out. I did love Petra and Meads in the opening to semifinal one, that sort of, or semifinal two, I think it was, the parody of them in the tanning beds doing the parody of Loreen's Tattoo. I thought that was pretty funny. There were parts that were funny between the two of them. Obviously, there was the infamous phone grinder thing, which was very staged. Obviously, most of us are probably aware of that. So there were some funny bits. The fact that, she was trying to sell a Will and Grace DVD. I loved how she didn't really take the contest that seriously. She, calling out the homosexuals. No, you're a Eurovision fan. I mean, she's got wit. She's got charm. I was here for it. But yeah, boy, what a crazy season this has been, and it's not going to end. There is going to be more drama unfolding, I am certain. This story is not over. Will Israel participate in 2025? Will the Netherlands participate in 2025? There are so many other countries that, like San Marino, has questioned whether they're going to return. I'm really worried about the number of countries that want to continue doing this contest. 37, we had 37 entrants a decade ago, and that is the lowest number that we've ever been at in like the last 20 years. The contest can't dip below that. If we dip below 35 participating countries, it's really sad. So I really hope that it was nice to have Luxembourg back, but I hope that we get maybe North Macedonia back next year, or maybe Bulgaria, some of the countries who are just taking a year or two off. Romania, I hope that these countries come back because we need them to beef up the numbers of countries that may be taking a break of their own. It would be nice to see Montenegro back. I really do wonder. And of course, Switzerland ain't cheap. And one thing that I know a lot of people I've heard expressed is their concern is that, based on the experience, even Lazara has come out, and I mean, some artists from last year have even come out protesting how the EBU has handled all of this with Israel and everything, with Just. And I do wonder, does this mean that moving forward, no one's going to want to do Eurovision anymore? And the only people who do are going to be people who sign up 100% knowing the propaganda that they are going to espouse, meaning we're going to get a lot of artists who are not willing to speak up when they feel they need to, who are going to be easily silenced by an NDA, who are going to not want to rock the boat and, potentially cause any sort of conversation that, the EBU deems controversial. I really worry that we're not going to have more Bambi Thugs or Nemos moving forward with the contest based on how both of those artists have talked about how they feel treated this year. The Israeli broadcaster has been posting these very transphobic, queerphobic, hateful parodies and mockeries of Bambi Thug, Marina Sati, of Nemo, of Used, in the name of entertainment, because those are those are the ones they're picking on the most. Marita Sati had this moment where she was filmed pretending to fall asleep while Eden was speaking at a press release. Obviously, Used Klein has become the de facto enemy of the Israeli delegation. And then, of course, Bambi has been the most vocally pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel in the contest, along with Nemo supporting her. They're both also non-binary, which because the conservatives all aflame and upset. I mean, there's just so much that it's just like Israel is not presenting itself like a liberal, forward-thinking part of this conversation. I always thought of them as part of Europe, even though they're not geographically, but this year is really, by Netanyahu's actions and the way that the government is behaved and the way that propaganda is starting to behave through KAN, I'm starting to really feel like they shouldn't be welcome at this party, because I have never seen, in, well, my experience covering Eurovision, a broadcaster behave like this and tolerate sort of this kind of behavior, I should say, from its members towards other delegations, other participants in the contest. There has just been so much hate and harassment and insult thrown around and fuel added to fire of hate thrown at those artists. And that is against the rules. But the EBU has done nothing about it yet. They've issued a statement saying they are aware of breaches of harassment, but they have not made any sort of statement that indicates that they are targeting more so one country over the other. It was a blanket statement saying they are going to address, instances that were brought up of, foul play. And maybe that means they are going to sit down with Israel and take them to task. But my concern is that they'll be bribed out of it, or that they're going to actually punish the other delegations for even speaking up about it in the first place. They'll find some way to scapegoat them. And it just really concerns me going forward. And it concerns a lot of Eurovision fans. Before I sign off, what are some other things I want to say? Shout out to Angelina Mango. I enjoyed Lanoya. I think that I preferred her styling in the semifinal performance, but I really did love that she wore black for the flag parade, because when she was holding the Italian flag, it was basically black with the Italian flag. It made it look like the Palestinian colors. I thought that was a very smart move for her to bypass their rigid censorships for support. And I really do think Lanoya, although perhaps with how it came together on the stage, things might have been done differently in my book, I was still so on board with the performance and was really proud of her. And as far as Nemo's styling, that was the one other thing I wanted to talk about. I was 100% here for it. I like the poofy pink feathery dress and the skirt. I definitely can understand some people's critique about something that's a bit garish and a little out there, taking perhaps a little bit of, the viewership, making them a little bit less hesitant to vote for it. But the whole point of the code is about being unapologetically yourself and, being different in a crowd of same and of homogeny. And so Nemo needed to wear something that had kind of that unlike, whoa, that's something I can't look away from, even if it's a little bit like, maybe it's not tastefully as couture as some people would like. But I thought it was brilliant. And then it captured the verve and spirit of Nemo and the song wonderfully. So, gosh, so much to talk about. I got to wrap this up. What were your thoughts on Eurovision 2024? Are you feeling hopeful about the direction the contest is heading? Are you feeling concerned? I have got a lot of concerns. I really don't want to see Eurovision crash and burn. I want to just end on this last note because this is something that, like I really felt like the whole time I was watching Eurovision, I felt I needed to say. It gives me no pleasure because when I was watching the Israeli performance, and it was the first time that had ever heard the song in full, the whole time I was thinking, what a shame it is that this, decently talented vocalist uh, is being viewed through this lens because of outside events in this contest. And many will say that, Eurovision is about a song and it shouldn't be judged on governments of the countries they're representing, blah, 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 blah. I will counter by the fact that, the way the broadcaster has behaved, the way the song was composed with the lyrics, the, campaign that has been so aggressive to, especially this year, ensure that it is not only at the final, but as high as it can be on the scoreboard. The fact that Netanyahu has been her biggest cheerleader on social media and that the Israeli president was the one who intervened to try and force it through to the EBU for lyric acceptability. There is so much propaganda in Israel's presentation that you can't view it outside of the context of what is going on in Gaza at the moment. And so it was really unfortunate that that is what is in the consciousness of us, all of us right now, but it is inescapable. It is true that, where Israel would score on this scoreboard isn't going to hurt or help Palestinians in any way meaningfully, but Israel needs to know that it's crossed the line and that it is committing acts of atrocity against people that it is disproportionate to what is being inflicted upon them. Just look at the death tolls between both countries since October 7th, okay? And you'll get what I'm saying on both sides. One is disproportionately being wiped out by the other. One is disproportionately more powerful than the other. And this is a conflict that has been going on for a lot longer than October 7th. And yes, I do condemn Hamas, and of course would love to see Hamas overthrown as the leader of the Palestinian people. But it is not as black and white as that, and I think that Israel needs to take the higher road and not try to create more Hamas by killing every single person and their family that lived there in response, because that is certainly not going to lead to peace. It is only going to continually lead to more death and destruction for both Palestinians and Israelis. Israel is completely missing the ball on the opportunities that they consistently have to take the high road on this conflict. And it has been, for the last 2 decades especially, very apparent that Netanyahu and the Likud Party have no interest in a two-state solution. They have no interest in Palestinian autonomy and respecting them and treating them as equal citizens in their own country. They don't view them as human, and it's very clear. If you look at and read the news from sources that are not Israeli propaganda, seeing what's going on there, they are told to evacuate. They have nowhere to go. They have overpopulated, completely, sewage-infested cities that have been already bombed that they're told to go to or sleep in tents in the boiling sun because they're going to bomb their own homes. You must evacuate this town. We'll bomb that town eventually next, but we'll just move and displace you from month to month, and that's somehow okay. Oh, how generous of them to do that. I didn't want to go off on my high horse here, but I had to state all these things because I know I'm going to get something in the comments, trying to justify it. And I do not feel it is justifiable what they are doing. It was a tragedy what happened in October, but this is not the appropriate response. Diplomacy, where did it go? Where did it go? So what I'm saying is that it was impossible for me, especially looking at that postcard, which I felt was so sickening in my stomach to see Eden in this beach setting in Israel thinking about what Gazans are dealing with miles away, in the same country, so to speak. It is so wrapped up in the image. I mean, this if she had sent a song that was about a boyfriend and it was a romantic love song, you could have some plausible deniability. But it was very clear when you looked at the lyrics what the song was referring to. And it's going to invite that divisiveness. It's going to invite that controversy, whether you want it to or not. And you can't separate the broadcaster, which is an extension of the government, especially more so in countries like Israel. I know that Netanyahu doesn't, on paper, control that broadcaster, but there is increasingly more and more censorship. And there would be no way in hell that Netanyahu would ever sanction someone who was not a Zionist, who was pro Palestinian to represent Israel at this day and age. So you know that the representative is completely on board with the propaganda and supportive of it. And Eden has expressed that. She's actually going to be joining the IDF in potentially this year. It is mandatory for all Israelis, but there are so many ways that rich Israelis get around it. And I'm sure she comes from a rich family. Oh, let's not forget that she's actually Russian as well. And she's performed in Crimea when it was occupied illegally. Of course, that was when she was underage. It's more her parents' fault for that. But it's, there are a lot of uncomfortable ties to Russia that she has as well. And that she has not denounced publicly, as, denouncing Putin. So one can assume that she is, it's like, until you say something, we are going to side-eye you, unfortunately. So it was really sad, and I really wish that I could judge the song apolitically, but we just can't. I just can't. As a human being, I just can't. And so it brings me no pleasure to, talk about Israel in this sort of demonistic way. This is not about the Jewish people. This is not about the Jewish faith. This is about a government which is very right-leaning, who has been elected into power for far too long, who is too power hungry and too hungry for blood and violence and revenge to see clearly about what really matters and how to really create a safe and self-sustaining state for the Jewish people. I would love to see a state like Israel flourish, but I do not want it at the expense of human lives. So, that's all I'm going to say. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and something, if you've got more to add, please share in the comments. This has been a very long video. There was just so much to talk about. This was such a crazy contest, and it's only going to get crazier, unfortunately. I don't necessarily feel too optimistic about where we're headed for the next iteration of the contest, i.e. Israel being banned. If Russia's banned, we should ban Israel. That's the precedent that you set. We have precedent. You need to follow it. And I'll be interested to see what comes of the Just Klein versus this worker employee for the EBU, what comes of that debacle, and where Avotros will stand in that, and whether that they will return, because they are clearly not happy with the EBU, and they are the 6th biggest funder. So they pull out their money. That's kind of something to make Eurovision concerned. So, and if Martin Osterdahl or anyone higher up in the EBU is going to resign, and that there will be a serious change of leadership. I hope so, but I'm not super optimistic. We shall see. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. Please give this a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new here for all my Eurovision content, and as well as all the music content in general that I review music on this channel. I'll see you all in my next video. Peace, love, and light. Bye.